No, it's Catherine Varn, Tampa Bay Axios. And good morning and welcome to The Skinny for Friday, June 26th. I'm Mitch Perry, the senior political reporter for the Florida Phoenix. Flying solo this morning as my skinny colleague Ray Rowe is out on vacation this week. But hope he's having a great time. And thank you so much for joining us. We have a really exciting show for you today featuring two top reporters who cover the state of Florida and the Tampa Bay area respectively. Coming up in a few minutes, we'll be speaking live from Tallahassee with one of our finest reporters who covering state government. That's Lawrence Maurer with the Tampa Bay Times, who will be leaving the Times and Florida soon. So we'll talk to him about that and some of the biggest stories he's covered during his tenure with the Times and in Florida here. And then the second half of the show, we'll have Catherine Varn with Axios Tampa Bay joining us live in the studio to talk about things happening in the Bay Area this weekend, including St. Pete Pride, which of course is the biggest Pride festival in the Southeast, and what its future might be like following the passage of an anti-DEI bill passed by the legislature this year. Also, Kanye West, or Ye, performing tonight and Sunday in Raymond James Stadium. That's despite the protests from the Jewish community and lawmakers like Rick Scott, who say the show should be canceled because of Ye's anti-Semitic comments, which have led to cancellations of some of his concerts around the world. But first, we're going to spend a few minutes chatting about James Othmeier. He's Florida's Attorney General, of course. He was appointed to the job by his close ally, Governor Ron DeSantis, in February of last year after DeSantis appointed Ashley Moody to the U.S. Senate. Othmeier's on the ballot for the first time before voters, and he's been very skillful in getting his name in the news, sometimes when going after what many would say are really important investigations, such as his first-in-the-nation lawsuit against OpenAI and its chief executive officer, Sam Altman, alleging the company knowingly released and aggressively marketed ChatGPT to the public, including to children, while concealing serious risks, suppressing internal safety warnings, and deceiving Floridians about the true nature and dangers of the product. But there have also been other interventions which critics say are pure publicity stunts, such as threatening the NFL with legal action and enforcement measures over its Rooney Rule and diversity hiring practices, alleging they violate Florida's Civil Rights Act. He's demanding the league suspend the rule, which requires teams to interview diverse candidates for head coaching and executive positions. And then just last week, he announced he had launched a formal religious discrimination investigation against Major League Baseball following a controversy where MLB issued warnings to three pitchers with my team, the San Francisco Giants, who wrote Bible verses on their caps during Pride Night in San Francisco a couple weeks ago. Not every Florida Republican is really all enamored by Othmeier's actions, and that includes our first guest joining us here via Zoom, and that's attorney Stephen Leskowitz. Stephen, are you there with us?
I am, yes, sir. And good morning to you, Mitch.
Good morning. Welcome to Skinny, Stephen Leskowitz. I want to tell our listeners you are, of course, the interim city manager for the city of Punta Gorda, and you're an elected official with the Port Charlotte Airport Authority. And you had been a candidate against Othmeier for the GOP primary election before opting not to qualify earlier this month. Stephen Leskowitz, we do appreciate you joining us. I guess the first thing we should say is, and we did talk last week in a story I wrote for the Phoenix, it's very tough going against somebody who's the current incumbent in the case of James Othmeier, who, of course, has been endorsed by Donald Trump. Is that why you backed out of the race ultimately, that the party, it was just going to be too tough for you to contend against him?
No, Mitch, it had nothing to do with whether he was endorsed by President Trump or not. It had everything to do with the way the Republican Party of Florida treats candidates during their primary election.
And how so?
As soon as the RPOF comes in and says we're endorsing someone, it precludes any candidate in the Republican Party from speaking at any types of Republican events. So the way that the Republican Party of Florida did this was in January of this year, they turned around and what I believe backdoored an endorsement to Mr. Othmeier in order to keep myself and any other candidates from speaking at these events. Now, the RPOF turns around and says no Republican executive committee is permitted to endorse candidates during the primary, but just ironically and unfortunately, the RPOF did exactly that, precluding the RECs from being able to hear from grassroots candidates.
Right. And so we should say, and the reason why, we're talking to you right now is not only are you critical of James Othmeier, you actually came out and endorsed his Democratic opponent, former Miami-Dade County State Senator Jose Javier Rodriguez. Tell us why you're doing that.
But, Mitch, I mean, it was a difficult decision, but it was the right decision to do. Being the attorney general, Mr. Uthmeier has turned this into a political chaotic fiasco. And he believes that the attorney general's office is actually supposed to be some kind of political office where he takes his political views, his personal views, turns them into what the rule of law is actually supposed to be. Being the attorney general, you are supposed to follow the rule of law. You're supposed to understand the separation of powers. You are supposed to enforce the laws of the state of Florida, not turn around and say, well, I think they're unconstitutional, therefore we're just going to go ahead and not enforce them anymore, and that they're not enforceable. And he's taken a completely different approach to what actually being an attorney is supposed to be, let alone his ethical and legal duties as being the attorney general. Therefore, as a result of that, my only choice was to speak up, speak out, speak loud, and endorse Jose Rodriguez as a Democrat to be our next attorney general. Now, it's okay if Jose and I have different political views, but that's not what the attorney general is supposed to be about. You're there to protect the people of the state of Florida and not try to force your political views upon people.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I know, and I think on the Second Amendment issues alone, there have been several occasions here in the year, a little over a year and a half, that Uthmeier's been Attorney General. We'll just recite some to the audience. Going back to last year, the day after the U.S. Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit upheld a state law that prohibits people under the age of 21 from purchasing long guns, Uthmeier declared on social media that the 2018 law, that just came out of the Parkland assassinations massacre, was unconstitutional. He added that the NRA wanted to appeal the ruling of the Supreme Court. His office would not defend the law. Then last September, he announced he wouldn't challenge a decision by the Florida First District Court of Appeal, of course, striking down the 87 ban on open carry, so that's legal now, although the legislature never codified that. Then let's see, back in February, he asked an appeals court to support a teenager's right to carry a concealed firearm, despite a Broward judge previously ruling the state's ban on concealed carry for 18 to 20-year-olds was unconstitutional. And we should say last week a Florida appeals court panel ruled that that law does in fact violate the Second Amendment. Also in March, he argued in a legal filing that a Florida law that bans all convicted felons from possessing firearms is unconstitutional because it applies to, quote, non-dangerous convicted felons. Certainly in that case, Stephen Leskovich, that is something that he's just declaring on his own, right? That's not anywhere in the law.
Mitch, it's absolutely asinine. I am a huge Second Amendment advocate. I own firearms. I own long guns. I own semi-automatic rifles. And to turn around and you hit, your list is not even exhaustive of it. And to turn around and say, hey, we're not going to defend this. We're asking the Supreme Court to declare it unconstitutional. I believe it's unconstitutional. That's not his duty to do that. It's not his duty. It's not his obligation. That is up to the Florida legislature. That is up to the Florida courts to actually do that. That's exactly why the Florida Association of Prosecutors have turned around and filed an amicus brief when he said that the law should be changed regarding convicted felons, nonviolent felons, from having firearms. Kind of let me give you this example, Mitch. When I was a former prosecutor and a defense attorney, a 40-time, 50-time, even a 100-time convicted felon of drug possessions, cocaine, meth, fentanyl, are considered nonviolent felonies. Now, do I want a multiple-time drug addict being able to purchase firearms? Heck no. That's why the prosecutors in the state of Florida are opposed to his provisions with that and have filed motions with the Court of Appeals asking them not to adhere to this nonsense that Uthmeier is actually doing.
Yeah, again, we're talking right now with Stephen Leskovich. He is the interim city manager for the city of Punta Gorda. He's a Republican, as you're hearing right now, and he's very much against James Uthmeier and his bid for election in November. We should also say one thing. You're right. I did not exhaust the list of things that he's declared unconstitutional. On Martin Luther King Jr. Day of this year, he announced in an advisory opinion that he would not enforce approximately 80 state laws that he alleged were unconstitutionally race-based. That prompted a furious response from Black Democrats in the legislature, with Senator Mac Bernard from West Palm Beach saying that his unilateral decision was tantamount to disobeying the laws that he's required to uphold. In fact, he said they called on the governor to suspend him, like the governor did with Andrew Warren here in Hillsborough County back in 2022. You might recall, our listeners certainly do, that case where those were things that Warren, he was accusing him and Monique Worrell in 23 in Orange and Osceola counties of not following the law. DeSantis said at that time, the role of a state attorney is, quote, apply the law and enforce the law, not pick and choose which laws you like and which laws you don't like. Your thoughts, Stephen Leskovich?
Yeah. Mitch, I wholeheartedly agree with you. And the way that Mr. Uthmeier has kind of differentiated this is he said that the prosecutor in Tampa and the one in Orlando didn't use the magic words, I believe it's unconstitutional, therefore I'm not going to follow it. That's the way Uthmeier claims he has gotten around the law, by just saying, I believe it's unconstitutional, therefore we're going to strike down, I think it was 87 laws that he said he wasn't going to enforce on Martin Luther King Day, which goes to him, wanting to sue the NFL and Major League Baseball. And I mean, this is crazy, absolutely crazy that, these organizations that are privately held organizations, he's going after them because he doesn't like any type of DEI. I'm not a fan of DEI either, Mitch. However, there's a procedure you have to go through it. The whole Major League Baseball thing. The players union signed an arbitration clause that says you can't do this. And Uthmeier wants to turn around and say it's now religious discrimination. There's no religious discrimination. I mean, the guy is just off his rocker. He is dangerous for the state of Florida. All
right, we're going to leave it there. Stephen Leskovich, he is, of course, the interim city manager for the city of Punta Gorda, a Republican, and who's coming out and endorsing Democrat Jose Javier Rodriguez in the race for Attorney General. Stephen, really appreciate your time here on The Skinny this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, and you have a wonderful day.
Okay, you too. All right, we're going to pivot now, talk to some reporters here. We're going to start off with Lawrence. Lawrence, are you joining us there from Tallahassee?
Yes, I am. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Lawrence Maurer, of course, with the Tampa Bay Times, has been with the Times, I believe, since 2017. And great to have you here, Lawrence. Really appreciate talking to you here. But we want to tell our listeners here, of course, that you are not long with the Times. You are going to be leaving very soon. Tell us what's happening.
Yeah, my wife, Alexandra Glorioso, got a job with ProPublica, the investigative nonprofit out in Texas. And so we're moving to Austin, probably in August.
Wow. And so when's your last day with the Times?
It's going to be a week from today will be my last day.
Wow. I mean, and again, happy for both of you, and absolutely, because you're both such dynamic reporters, but it's just a loss. I mean, both for Times and Herald readers, but we'll deal with that. So it's great to have you here. And of course, I think you as a couple, a power couple there in Tallahassee, you're the team, of course, behind all the great reporting about the Hope Florida controversy. Speaking of James Uthmeier, I guess, our listeners I'm sure are familiar, but just to, we'll update them basically. Of course, the Hope Florida controversy revolves around allegations that the Hope Florida Foundation, that was founded by First Lady Casey DeSantis in 2021, received $10 million of a $67 million legal settlement between the Centene Corporation and the Florida Agency for Healthcare Administration. Hope Florida diverted the proceeds of a couple of nonprofits, who then immediately used most of that funding to send it to a group called Keep Florida Clean, which is a political action committee with ties to the governor that was designed to campaign against Amendment 3. That was the 2024 constitutional amendment designed to campaign. The amendment, of course, was to legalize recreational cannabis. And that campaign was run by James Uthmeier, who, of course, was DeSantis' chief of staff and is now our attorney general. That's pretty clear. Is that accurate, Lawrence?
Yeah, no, that's all accurate. I mean, basically, the situation was that the administration wanted to fight these amendments last year, and the governor, though, his donors weren't coming through to help him out. And so they were basically looking for ways to move state money out of the state coffers to James Uthmeier's political committee to fight these things. And some of that money was $10 million from this legal settlement.
Right. And the last reporting we learned about this was a couple months ago, I think, that there was a secret grand jury, quote unquote, presentment in the ongoing investigation. The state attorney in Leon County, Jack Campbell, has declined to release the report, citing statutory confidentiality under a section of Florida law. Now, Uthmeyer has been asked about this. In fact, he was here at the Tampa Tiger Bay Club a month or so ago, maybe it was 2 months ago. And, you know, he's always said, I can't talk about this. In fact, recently, I don't know if you saw this, Lawrence, a few weeks ago, he was asked again at a press conference and he got all indignant. He said, and he got mad at the reporter. He said, you can't ask me that. You're trying to get me in trouble here. Are we ever going to see this report?
The short answer is yes. These reports by law have to be released. What's going on right now is that this provision in state law says that parties to this thing, basically people named in the report as potentially having done something wrong, have the ability to ask a judge to redact parts of it or all of it. However, like our review of these reports shows that basically that never, I mean, people do fight these things, but inevitably they always become public. We couldn't find a single state attorney who had ever said that these reports just never see the light of day. So what seems to be going on, and the reason why he keeps getting asked about this is because, you know, he, I'm sure, would love to have this report stay secret until after the election. He's up for election in November, his first election. And this report probably, because the mere fact that this report exists indicates that the grand jurors thought that something went very wrong here. And they're trying to alert the public to it. That is the purpose of these reports. So he has an incentive basically to keep it secret, try to delay the judicial process until after the election. But eventually it will be released.
Yeah, it's good to know. Again, if you're just tuning in right now, or you're listening to The Skinny here on WMNF, almost 23 minutes after the hour. We're speaking right now with Lawrence Maurer, a reporter for the Tampa Bay Times who covers state government up there in Tallahassee for just a little longer. He'll be there leaving next week and then ultimately moving to Austin, Texas. Lawrence, one of the things that you've really carved out, I believe, in your reporting over the years in Tallahassee is covering the whole property insurance situation, which, of course, remains one of the top issues that Floridians or just hate, basically, obviously, because of what's gone on with the property rates over the recent years here. Now, we're hearing, and we've heard, of course, from the governor and others in the legislature that, you know, this has gotten a lot better. In fact, I'm going to read here from a story from WTVT, Fox 13 here from this week. I'm quoting here. It says, Florida's auto and home insurance markets are stabilizing, delivering much needed relief to drivers and homeowners across the state as insurance prices come down. The downward trend stems directly from changes passed by state lawmakers in 2023, which helped reduce insurance claim costs and lawsuit abuse. This is something that we've been hearing from DeSantis, Blasingoli, et cetera. Is that accurate?
Well, in the sense that, yeah, I mean, the state is not seeing companies go out of business and they're not seeing, you know, crazy rate hikes every year. Yeah, that's true. The question is, why is it happening? And you know, this goes back to why we got interested in this beat in the first place, or got onto this. I mean, I basically was like, well, what is actually going on in the market? What's causing these companies to go out of business? What's causing these gigantic rate hikes? And, you know, the common excuse was lawsuits, you know, and there's no doubt there were a ton of lawsuits. There still are a lot of lawsuits. The question is, how many of those lawsuits are frivolous? And you know, it was something that basically, there was a question that literally no single person has ever answered. And that's what drove a lot of my reporting. I mean, this is an industry that's based on data. You know, insurance is all about data and, you know, analyzing data and whatever. You should be able to show some evidence for this beyond the fact that there are a lot of lawsuits. I mean, Florida's insurance market is an outlier for a variety of reasons, you know, from the rest of the country.
Right.
Lawsuits are just one of them. So is the legal reforms responsible for what's going on right now? Possibly in some way, but also we haven't had any windstorms, major windstorms that caused the kind of damage and that we saw, you know, 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Right, right. Now, Democrats, right, some of their criticism of the recently approved joint resolution for a constitutional amendment on property taxes, which of course we'll be voting on in November. Their line has been like, the Floridians are not crying for help with property taxes, although some are. Let's be clear about that. But that they hear more from their constituents about property insurance and what it costs now. And again, acknowledging that we have stabilized this market and the like. Did they come up? I don't really recall anything major happening. I think there was one bill that the governor is just signed here, actually, about small business and condo owners and insurance policies. But with the Dems, that's been the thing they continue to talk about here. I don't know if they had any specific proposals in this past session. What is your thought about there could be more done on this issue?
Well, I mean, there's one thing that the legislature did that they absolutely did not need to do, which is incentivize, people to be kicked off of citizens insurance. And David Jolly, this is an old idea that goes back, literally, almost 2 decades now. But, there was a push way back when, and this is what David Jolly is proposing, is to basically allow people to just buy into Citizens, use Citizens for their insurance.
Right.
And that, frankly, if the state had done that back in 2005, 6 or so, frankly, it would have been a self-sustaining model by now. It would have been, because we went about 10 years without storms, the fund would have been fully, covered. It would have been very, very healthy. It would have been a massive success story for the state had the legislature done that. But basically State Farm and other major companies were in favor of that because they don't really like the windstorm risk. But what killed it way back when are all the little domestic insurance companies, the little ones that have a lot of sway in Tallahassee and make a lot of money in years when there are no storms. So there are options the state could be doing to lower rates, but they just have not done that. They think the market can drive down rates just through competition.
I think the bill you're referring to, Lawrence, that you said they didn't have to do. I think it was a Joe Gruder's bill, right? That was the one I'm reading from. Actually, like I said this morning, Patrick Manteiga. He talks about this. This is Manteiga, of course, is kind of opinionizing here, but he says Governor DeSantis has just doomed thousands of small businesses and condo owners to 15% increases in their insurance policy costs, with insurers who are mostly unregulated by state laws. He signed the bill that forces commercial buildings and condo owners out of state-run Citizens property insurance. Citizens customers must leave their coverage and go with unregulated insurers if the new private insurance offers a price no more than 15% greater than they are currently paying. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's accurate. That bill is not an organic bill. That's not an organic idea. That bill came from a company that wants the business. They basically want to create an exchange within Citizens for these commercial policies. And they went to Citizens, they went to anybody who they could lobby up here in Tallahassee, and they got Joe Gruters to run the bill, and it had support from the incoming Senate President, Jim Boyd, had support from others. I mean, the insurance commissioner was adamantly against it because he thought it was really bad for policyholders. It's basically forcing them into essentially unregulated insurance, surplus lines insurance, which is not really regulated by the state. Some safeguards were put in, and the insurance regulator, Mike Jaworski, eventually was like, okay, I'm all right with this. But basically, that was a special interest bill. That's just a bill for a company that wants this business from the state to create this exchange.
Again, if you're just tuning in right now, you're listening to Skinny here on WMNF 88.5 FM. I'm Mitch Perry. I'm speaking right now with Lawrence Maurer, reporter of the Tampa Bay Times. We've got Catherine Varn from Axios Tampa Bay coming up in just a few minutes here. And one more question on insurance, Lawrence, and that is, let's go back to before last year's legislative session in early 2025. You wrote a very explosive piece that was about a March 2022 report commissioned by the Florida Office of Insurance Regulation that found that insurers who were claiming financial ruin after Hurricanes Irma in 2017 and Michael in 2018 had paid $680 million in dividends to shareholders while simultaneously funneling billions to affiliated companies. This was a big deal when this story came out, and it led to one hearing. I know you remember it. That House Speaker Danny Perez called. There was the House Insurance and Banking Subcommittee on a Friday morning, lasted 3 hours. A lot of drama for everybody there. And I remember, I'm going to quote Mike Caruso, former Palm Beach Republican. He said, "Our purpose here today is to find out if insurance companies have been allegedly ripping the citizens of Florida off. Why are rates so high? We want to find that out." And this reports the state's attempting to determine the answer to that. And he said it's only 7 pages long. It deals with data from 2017 to 2019. Today's 2025, and I find it as a legislator, that's outrageous that we're getting something that's so antiquated and so full of flaws. And, I guess the upshot is, whatever happened about all that?
Basically nothing. The legislature had the option of requiring an updated version of that report and stuff, and it just never happened. It all just disappeared. And that's kind of the story of insurance in Florida, like insurance regulation, is that, when there's opportunities to enhance oversight, they don't do it. Insurance is an incredibly powerful lobby here.
Hey, so let's talk about what's going on right now. We're in this transition period. Ron DeSantis got the budget the other day. This is really his last days of really showing his power in Tallahassee. Although, obviously, I shouldn't say that. He's got the executive power, and he will use it until he's no longer in Tallahassee in early January. But, we just got through this 2 years, or basically, Danny Perez and Senate President Ben Alberton. And a lot was made, especially last year, of the clash between the House and Governor DeSantis, and it seems like the Senate and Alberton just basically goes along with the governor wants here. What's your take about what just is going on in Tallahassee itself, state government, in terms of the what was accomplished? In fact, a lot of these July 1st, we're going to see some new laws go into play, but it seems like there wasn't as many major things. There's certainly significant things that have happened. I don't want to say that, but in terms of just your thoughts about this past legislative session year.
Yeah, well, it was kind of a continuation in some ways of the previous year. I mean, last year, the new Senate President and House Speaker, Ben Alberton and Danny Perez, they entered that session in lockstep, fighting the governor, basically, on the immigration special session. And that, over the course of that first session, it quickly eroded. Partially, that was over Hope, Florida, but really the governor just kind of leaned on Ben Alberton. And kind of, use their, Alberton is not a confrontational guy. And that continued into this session where, Danny Perez felt very, very burned by Alberton, and to the point where, the two weren't for a while, wouldn't even negotiate with each other. They had to send emissaries to negotiate with each other on the budget and stuff. And, that's what you saw this year is a lot of stuff just, the two chambers were not in lockstep. DeSantis didn't have a ton of priorities he wanted to get done, and so not a lot happened. And then the session dragged out, and there's going to be a new class of people coming in, and I think a lot of people. Last session was extraordinary. Mitch, you've covered probably more sessions, I'm sure more sessions than I have, but last session was extraordinary, and this one was just kind of like the hangover, basically.
Yeah, exactly here. One thing I want to get to as well, I want to talk to you about, because this is something, I looked up this about you, and I did not know this. Of course, you were at the Palm Beach Post before you came to the Times. Now, of course, you're originally a Vegas guy, right? We know that from Las Vegas. But you wrote for the Post, and you wrote this deeply research story back in 2014 regarding the winners of the Florida lottery. And with the help of some really top-notch mathematicians, you uncovered fraud within the lottery system, which I guess ultimately resulted in the state legislature making some changes. I didn't know anything about this, Warren, so really tell us and our listeners what that was all about.
Yeah, it was. I was hired at the Palm Beach Post on their investigative team in 2013, it was 2013, and I knew no one, and while I was trying to get sourced up and stuff, I, basically just kind of on a whim, I requested the state's database of lottery winners. They track everyone who wins more than $600, because anyone who wins $600 or more has to go to a lottery shop or a lottery district office to cash it in, give your name, etc. And I requested this gigantic database of everybody who'd won since the lottery was created, I think in 90 or in 88. And just sorted. I was like, oh, look, I'm curious if I was looking for something else actually, but I just sorted the database by, the people's first name, last name, and their hometown, and saw all these people at the top had won hundreds of games, of all kinds, scratch off games, number games, anything, in some cases hundreds of times over the course of several years. And I was like, I'm a Vegas guy. I know that lottery odds are far worse than any casino game you can play pretty much anywhere in the country. Lottery odds are terrible as far as getting your money back. And so my first thought was, there's no way these people are actually winning legitimately. And then I thought, well, theoretically, these people could win so much if they spent a ton of money and therefore lost a lot of money.
Right.
And so I was like, I want to find a mathematician willing to do some free work for me to figure out how much these people would have to spend to win this many games. And I called a bunch of statisticians and mathematicians all over the country, and finally got this guy Skip Garibaldi at UCLA, who really did some groundwork. He understood the mission. He basically called me back and said, I've been waiting for your call for years. And he did this groundbreaking math showing that these people would have had to spend, we're talking like tens of millions of dollars to win like $1 million, to have a 1 in a trillion chance of winning, $1 million in playing these little lottery games. And I basically found that a lot of these people, what was going on is they were essentially there was an underground network of people who is like, if you're a regular person who wins the lottery, you win $1,000 or whatever playing a scratch off. Well, if you owe debts to the state, like child support, you go to a district office, they're going to take that stuff out. They're going to take away your child support before they pay you a penny on that lottery winning. And so there was an underground network of people who are winning, or basically, cashing people's lottery tickets for free. These were not real winners. These are not for free, but they would take a cut.
Yeah.
And sure enough, the lottery, they were totally asleep at the wheel for this whole thing. But afterward, they raided a bunch of stores. They, now if you scan your ticket at a gas station or something and you're a winner, you'll get a chime. It'll play a chime. That's something that didn't exist before. In some of these cases, I'm sure the people were stealing tickets too. That's another thing that goes on, is that when you cash your ticket, turn in your ticket, the cashier will scan it on their end, on the machine that they see. And they would say, oh, sorry, not a winner here. Throw them all in the trash. And then when you leave, they'll turn around and pull the winners out and go cash them themselves. A lot of the biggest winners were, people who work at gas stations. And so this was basically like a massive, fraud scheme going on all over the state. And it turns out it was going on all over the country too, because after my stories ran, journalists all over the country duplicated it. And in often cases using Skip's work, Skip would help out on it, Skip Garibaldi.
Right.
And, it was going on everywhere. So it was kind of a fun story to kind of get started in Florida.
Yeah, incredible. And now you're ending your tenure in Florida. You're leaving one humidity-infested red state for another now. You can't get enough of that, can you?
No.
Yeah, so...
but no income tax. No income tax.
That's right, saying like that. We're one of 9 states, right, that doesn't have an income tax. Texas and Florida are 2 of 9 states. Your what are your thoughts here? It's exciting for you, obviously, moving on here to the Lone Star State, but leaving the Sunshine State. What are your thoughts here?
Well, I love Florida. I think it's, I love the natural beauty here. I think as far as a training ground for journalists, it's the number one training ground. I've worked in some of the best. Vegas is also an incredibly great news town. But Florida is pretty much unmatched, and I think it's the best training ground. And especially, I'm going to miss covering, especially Uthmeier. Uthmeier is going to be, he's absolutely has his sights set on running for governor after being attorney general. I think that I'm going to miss watching that and covering that. and also the Donald's administration. I'm going to, if presumably he's the governor.
Right.
Let's not, I won't get ahead of myself here. But I'm going to miss covering these people. I'm going to miss the press corps up here.
Yeah, the press corps is incredible, and you've been a major part of it, you and your wife, over the last decade or so. And so, as a reader, really going to miss you, Lawrence, and hopefully we can stay in touch. And I just wish you and Alex the best of luck going forward.
Thank you so much, Mitch. And I'm going to miss your questions in the gaggles, and having you, being able to rely on you when I got questions too.
Well, all the best to you, Lawrence. Thank you so much for joining us here on The Skinny.
Thanks, Mitch.
All right, take care. Okay, that was Lawrence Maurer, and yeah, it's a huge loss. Catherine, Lawrence, right? He's so great. I mean,
yeah. I was just texting him actually.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
So we should tell our listeners. Okay, the voice you're now hearing live in the studio is Catherine Varn, another great reporter here covering Florida and Tampa Bay news and politics here. And Catherine, you of course are with Axios Tampa Bay, which I think you've been since 2023. Is that accurate?
Yeah, it's been 3 years just passed the beginning of this month.
You were at the Tampa Bay Times and the USA/Gannett Network. So you've been covering last decade or so?
Yeah, it's been almost 11 years covering Tampa Bay and Florida. Yeah,
absolutely.
And getting to work with people like Lawrence, who he's so right. The press corps is incredible. It really, Florida is such a great training ground.
It is. It really is. And we're in the biggest market, 11th biggest market in the country here. I was talking to Chris Young over here at WMNF, who's getting a job in Miami actually, and Miami's big time, obviously, but it's actually a smaller media market. People don't realize that. It's the 18th biggest media market in the country. Orlando's 15th. We're 11th. By the way, if our listeners want to chime in here, the phone number to call in 813-239-9663. You can also send us an email at dj@wmnf.org. We got a lot of things to talk about, Catherine. I want to talk about what's going on. A couple things here in the Bay Area. Let's start with this Kanye West concert that's coming up tonight, because this has really become a thing in terms of a news story. And, Kanye West, Ye, as he's known by now, super controversial because of his anti-Semitic remarks. He's also made racist remarks, for that matter, over the years. Now, the story's kind of evolved in Creative Loafing. I wish Ray was here because it needs to take some plaudits here, because Creative Loafing, I think, moved the story along this past week. But, so a week ago Monday, we had Rick Scott at the Holocaust Museum lead this press conference saying Rick Scott has been, adamant, I don't want this concert to happen because the TSA, Tampa Sports Authority, which puts on these shows at Raymond James Stadium, they're getting taxpayer funds. We should not endorse, fund, an anti-Semite. And I get that. And I did my story last week and, talked to a First Amendment attorney who said because the fact it was, government backed, if you will, that it made it much more, problematic to say, we're not going to do this concert anymore in terms of, free speech, First Amendment rights. But Creative Loafing this week wrote something up. And let me see, do I have this here? Oh, yeah. So they wrote this. And again, and one of the things that the First Amendment attorney told me is, you remember when Richard Spencer, the white nationalist, spoke at University of Florida, I think it was in 2017.
Yeah, I actually was, excuse me, I was actually in Gainesville and covered that, yeah.
Right, and that was super controversial, but it was basically, they had to let him, speak, basically, in terms of, it was on a college campus and all that. They just really couldn't discriminate. That's the way I believe it went down. And so anyway, that was like what I was hearing about, this thing about Kanye West. But Creative Loafing wrote this week that in the days leading up to the concert announcement a couple months ago, the Tampa Sports Authority worked with Kanye West's camp to add otherwise atypical language to early drafts of the concert, essentially preventing the cancellation of the shows. And this is reported by Colin Wolfe, and he wrote, quote, this is the language. It said, quote, "For the avoidance of doubt, authorities shall not have the right to terminate, suspend, cancel, or otherwise interfere with the event based upon artist identity, prior or past public statements, public perception, political viewpoints, or the anticipated or actual content of the performance, provided that such performance complies with all applicable federal, state, and local laws and ordinances and venue regulations." That's something they added because Kanye West is getting canceled like all over Europe, right? So I guess it kind of puts them in a little bit of a different light, in terms of like saying, we can't do anything about this,
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting language, and it does seem to put them in a position where contractually they, I'm not a lawyer, but
right,
that they're, maybe perhaps what they've been saying that their hands are tied is there's some, truth there.
It certainly is now, I guess, is the thing.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And it's an interesting question of, separating the art from the artist. And, sort of, it seems like the shows are going to happen. I mean, all indications point to that. So then it becomes a choice on the consumer's part of, do I go?
Did you see the Tampa Bay Times? They had a story. I think,
Yes. Yeah. Gabrielle Calisi wrote a great story that was like,
am I a bad person if I go to the Kanye West concert?
Yeah. And, it was super interesting story. I mean, she talked to a musicology professor. She talked to some Holocaust survivors and then a super big Kanye fan who's been hanging out like in front of Raymond James
that's kind of weird.
Stadium.
But But it kind of reminds me, this Michael Jackson film came out recently the last couple of months, which is just going boffo box office. And yet simultaneously, there's a Netflix documentary about, things that he was going to court for in terms of, serious allegations here.
Right.
Right. And so, but so again, people can kind of, bifurcate or try to anyway, the art from what this person's like in real life. Okay. We've also got Pride Weekend coming up. I know you're very excited about that. You wrote this week, you had the scoop about the Pinellas County Commission not recognizing Pride Month. What was that all about?
Yeah, I mean, I was looking into, around this time, I kind of look at what governments are doing and are they acknowledging Pride, especially in the last few years as, restrictions have come out of the state legislature and Governor DeSantis. Florida's LGBTQ community has faced a lot of restrictions to their rights over the last several years. So I think it becomes important to look at your local government and local representatives and see, what they're saying about, as far as supporting or not supporting their LGBTQ residents. So I started looking into this because I had seen some stuff on social media about Largo actually not doing a Pride proclamation, and some PFLAG Safety Harbor / Greater Pinellas kind of organized some folks to go to the meeting, and they did end up doing that. So then I was kind of looking at, okay, what are other governments doing? This was in Largo. And so I just called up the commission chair and just asked, like, hey, are you doing a Pride proclamation this year? And this also came on the heels of Commissioner Chris Latvala posting that all 7 commissioners signed on to this Faith and Family Month proclamation, which Clearwater did last year and again this year.
And St. Petersburg did this.
Yeah, St. Pete had an interesting kind of reinterpretation of it, where they added some more inclusive language. But even with the inclusive language, folks were still kind of like, what are you guys doing? This movement's kind of seems to be growing. Governor DeSantis recognized Faith and Family Month this year. So, and if you go to the organization that is, the actual Faith and Family Month organization, they have a website, and on that website is a statement of faith that pretty much says like marriage is between a man and a woman, and it has some language that really essentially denies the existence of transgender people. So especially with the commission having supported that, I wanted to find out, they have recognized Pride every year since 2017, except 2020, although I couldn't find any evidence of 2020, but that was also the pandemic. Right. So, almost the last decade. And so Commission Chair Dave Eggers, kind of said, well, no community organizations had asked for a Pride proclamation, but I can see where we support the Faith and Family Month proclamation, but not Pride, that could come off a certain way. And so I'm going to pass it around to commissioners. I will take the language we used last year and see if commissioners have any interest in doing this. And from my reporting, I only Chair Eggers, Commissioner Brian Scott, and Commissioner Renee Flowers, and Commissioner Flowers is the lone Democrat on the commission these days. They all confirmed that they supported it, but the other 4 commissioners did not. Right. So, yeah, it's the first time in a while that they haven't recognized Pride, but it's the commission has changed quite a bit. It's moved, like I said, there's only one Democrat.
I didn't even know that, to be quite honest with you. Again, right, if you're just tuning in right now, you're listening to Skinny here, 1149. Mitch Perry with Catherine Varn from Axios Tampa Bay. So we're talking about, Pride weekend coming up here in St. Petersburg. You mentioned, and we should say, this year the governor signed SB 1134, which bans local governments from funding or promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives with local officials who are found to have violated the law subject to removal from office. Now, of course, again, we've got Pride in St. Pete, which is going to be huge, as always, starting tonight. Is that going to affect next year? Not so much having the parade itself and Pride and the festival, but the city's involvement with that? Do you know?
It could, yeah. I mean, and that's another, I think, significant thing about this year is that this is potentially the last year that governments can outwardly embrace and support their queer residents and constituents. As far as St. Pete goes, yeah, I mean, I was at the St. Pete's Progress Pride flag raising earlier this month, and reporters talked to Mayor Welch about this, and he said, as far as like raising the Pride flag, and they had an event at City Hall that morning too. They're still looking into whether that would be allowed. It seems from conversations he's had with staff, it seems like they'll still be able to provide free police and fire service for the parade. But last year the city provided about $138,000 in services for St. Pete Pride. I don't know if that would, in kind, sort of support providing police and fire. Again, the mayor said it seems like that'll be permissible, but they're still kind of looking at what else will and won't be allowed next year. So, we might not even have Mayor Welch,
right.
The
fighting
mayor
for his
election.
Re-election, this November, or August, we should say, actually, August 18th. And we're both St. Pete residents, very closely following the mayoral election, a couple city council races as well. Okay, another thing I want to get to is you wrote also about this whole issue about what Florida should bury in America's time capsule. So there's a national nonprofit called America 250, which is putting together a time capsule with items meant to represent the uniqueness of each state. Now, what Florida is doing is pretty damn lame, okay? It includes a government package that's a set of 4 challenge coins representing the Attorney General, the Florida Agency for Fiscal Oversight, or FAFO, the Florida Department of Agriculture, and DeSantis, and then also the House of Representatives Florida pin attached to a note to Americans from Danny Perez as House Speaker. Okay, so you asked at Tampa Bay, Axios Tampa Bay, asked readers some ideas what should be in this time capsule. What'd you hear from people?
Yeah, it was interesting. We had one reader just straight up say, and this seemed to be the prevailing opinion, like not what they did. We should not be memorializing lawmakers and the government. Like, let's show what Florida's all about. We're such a quirky state. We have so much fun culture and so many symbols of Florida culture. So we got some folks that the representation of like the real Florida, key lime pie, a Jimmy Buffett record, a stuffed manatee or alligator. And then we got some bleak stuff too. It kind of speaks to the mindset of some Floridians at least, where we had someone, a picture of Miami Beach before it's underwater, a picture of one of our few remaining springs. One reader wrote in and said a high school student ID with instructions for what to do in the case of a mass shooting printed on the back.
Whoa.
And then another reader said a list of the names of the more than 200 people on death row to make it clear to people in the future as to what a barbaric society Florida was in 2026. So, definitely some sobering stuff in there, but also some, fun pieces of culture. And then we also had a couple people suggest the Dennis Phillips, the local meteorologist.
Channel 28.
Yes, that he's a meteorologist, but more than that, people love that guy.
They do,
for good reason. He's such a great resource.
Well, all these these weather guys, they become crucial to us in the summertime and early fall.
And he has these hurricane prep tips, and rule number 7 on that list is stop freaking out until I tell you to. We're fine. Right. So, and he has merch like, rule number 7 mug or a rule number 7 sticker or whatever. So people suggested that too. So, we got quite an array of responses, but I mean, things that speak to the people and the culture of Florida rather than the leadership of Florida.
Yeah, there's no imagination there. Well, you one of the things I really do enjoy with your post on your daily newsletter that Axios Tampa Bay, and people can get that, right? How do they,
for free? Yeah.
So,
if you search, oh God, I should know this URL off the top of my head now, but if you just search subscribe Axios Tampa Bay, it'll take you to the page. You put in your email, boom, it's done.
Well, you write a lot about nature, and I do really appreciate this about you. And and there's been a lot of issues. Right back in April, there was this whole controversy about a TV series shooting at Fort DeSoto.
Yep.
A land, remember, that was going to deal. There was a threat to birds and gopher tortoises. Whatever happened with that situation?
They pulled out.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And there was another thing with a concert, right? That
Country Thunder,
right.
and that ended up moving to Coachman Park. Yeah, I mean, something Floridians show again and again and again is that they care a lot about our natural resources and our nature. And that transcends politics. It's one of the only things left these days that I feel like transcends politics.
You're right. Even going back, I've been covering Florida for 26 years. And when I came here in 2000, I was really not shocked, but just how the environment, which is not looked at the same way by officials in Tallahassee, but then it was sacred, when Jeb Bush was our governor back then, and there was a certain thing, and you still see that with offshore drilling and things like that people come together. It's very unpopular if anybody suggests it, but that's kind of eroded at the state level. But the local level where we live here in the Tampa Bay area, people write emails and call and go to their city councils and whatever. They care about that stuff a lot.
Yeah, definitely. We have Fort DeSoto here, which is a truly beautiful, pristine, county park. A lot of people think it's a state park, but it's a county park. Pinellas County runs that. And just our beautiful beaches. I mean, it's hard. I've gotten so into birds in part because it's hard to once you're aware of it and you're aware of nesting, and then I'm in some bird groups. So now I see all these pictures of little chicks, running around, and they're just so cute. So I think
last year, or they have it every year at Boyd Hill, right? They have this, I went to it last year.
Raptor Fest?
Yes.
Yeah. So Boyd Hill has, they have in-house raptors, birds of prey that can't live on their own otherwise because of injuries or, issues like that. So we've got Boyd Hill, we've got Fort DeSoto, we've got Felipe Park up in Safety Harbor, we've got, just all of the beaches have their own, there's some turtle nests on St. Pete Beach. There's a big colony of black skimmers right now that are nesting, and their little chicks are hatching and just running around the beach. So there's just so much great flora and fauna here that I think, if you live here and experience it, it's hard not to care.
And you're a native Floridian, right?
I'm actually not.
No.
I've been in Florida more than half my life, but I'm originally from Charleston, South Carolina, and moved here in high school. Moved to the Jacksonville area, Fleming Island for folks who are Clay County.
Yes.
So moved there in high school and just kind of made my way farther and farther south. I went to University of Florida in Gainesville. So it's been a very, I've come to love Florida. I'm never no shade to Charleston, but this is my home.
Right. And again, because of your love of nature and the way you write about it, it is something that's I think of you when you the things that you write about at Axios. So again, and what's like for you writing at Axios? It's a little different. They're really, I guess, Axios. I don't know how long it's been run nationally, and they've created some chapters in South Florida. You got some new.
Just this week we launched Fort Lauderdale and Hollywood, and
wow, so you got two in Broward County separately.
Yeah. But Naomi Feinstein is writing both of them, and then of course the Miami team, Summer Brugal and Martin Visolo, are also super. Will be contributing to those newsletters too. So they're kind of a South Florida team down there. It's great to see that we're expanding. I mean, it's, local news is my passion always. And so just the the fact that Axios is investing so heavily in it is really encouraging.
Yeah, they seem to have deep pockets, it seems to me. A lot of places, as we both know, like journalism is really, precarious in terms of, and yeah, you can read your stuff for free. Florida Phoenix, you can read that, and I'm, grateful because there's so much to read about state news, for example, that are paywalled, and I understand that, right? There's
Yeah, you got, journalists got to pay their bills
Absolutely.
too. But yeah, I always say, I would love if you supported Axios. Obviously, that's my baby, or not me and Jacob,
Yes.
my co-writer
Right.
Jacob Reyes'
Right.
baby, but support whatever news you like to read, whether that's us or the Tampa Bay Times or the, Creative Loafing or the Phoenix. I know you guys cover a little bit more like state stuff, but support whatever outlet you like, because local news needs all the support we can get.
All right. And with that, we're going to leave it. Catherine Varn of Axios Tampa Bay, thank you so much for coming into the studio. I really appreciate it. Great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I want to let our listeners know that next week, of course, is a holiday weekend, but we will have a show for you, a fresh show, actually. I did an interview with a new book called Bernie for Burlington. It's a biography about Bernie Sanders set back in the late 60s, early 70s, all the way before he becomes mayor of Burlington in the 80s. It's a fascinating book, and I had a long, over half an hour discussion. That will be part of the show that will air next Friday this time. So we will have fresh programming for you before the 4th of July, America's 250th. Want to thank Skip Sassy, for being our engineer today. Anthony Madur, we didn't get any phones, but Anthony's back there. Want to thank, of course, our guests, Stephen Leskovich, Lawrence Maurer, and Catherine Varn. For Ray Roa, I'm Mitch Perry. You are listening to WMNF 88.5 FM in Tampa. We'll have a broadcast next week, and then we'll see you live back in 2 weeks on July 10th. Thank you.